Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Greatest Games podcast on the Blizzard. My name is Marcus Spellout. With me is Jonathan Wilson. And with us today is Michael Yokhin, freelance football writer for the BBC, Guardian, 442, ESPN, among others, and contributor to the Blizzard. Michael, a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
My pleasure to be with you here.
Today we go back to the quarterfinal of Euro 2008 in Basel that ended Netherlands 1, Russia 3. Michael, why have you chosen this game?
Well, it's a very unusual game. It's ironic in many ways because first of all it was a Dutch derby between the real Dutch and the pretend Dutch, who actually were the better Dutch on the evening. But and it's a very special game because it gives a lot of you have to think a lot about what are those national priorities and what is the Dutch football, what does it actually mean? Can only the Dutch play it, or maybe the Dutch and the Catalans, or maybe the best Dutch football ever was played by Russia of Guus Hiddink on that evening in Basel. And also it gives a very interesting perspective on how results can be misleading, because the Dutch arrived to that game seemingly as favorites after thrashing Italy and France in their first two games at the Euros. And for those who have didn't see those games, on paper they looked like clear favorites to win the tournament. But those who actually watched those games saw a very defensive team with actually brilliant performance, and they had used almost all of their chances on the counterattack. But it was a defensive team, a very non-Dutch-like team. And on the other hand, the Russians, who started by being thrashed by Spain, they were one of the most attractive teams at the tournament, and those who followed their progress knew that they are actually the real favorites in that game. But the most ironic thing that after that game, after the Russians won that game, and they were confirmed as the real Dutchmen of the tournament, well, this success got absolutely no continuity, and they disappeared from that very game. It all went downhill for them, and from that game it all went uphill for the Dutchmen. So it is very. It might have been easy to predict the result in that specific game, but you couldn't base any predictions further down the way from that game forward. And it's a game which is quite ironic in many ways, because it is remembered as the best. It should have been probably the end of the Dutch team, and the big beginning for the Russian team. But in reality, it proved to be the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, indeed. I mean, Russia. Yeah, but Jonathan, what do you remember of Euro 2008 going into the tournament? Russia, they'd failed to qualify for World Cup 2006. They went out in the group stages of the Euros in 2004. I don't think many people would have thought they would reach the semi-final, but they did have Guus Hiddink in charge.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were two signs, and I was really fortunate in both respects here that I was in Moscow when Russia beat England 2-1 and beat them brilliantly. England led at half-time, but then the second half, Russia were absolutely sensational. And my real memory of that game, well, firstly, I was freezing because Lufthansa had lost my luggage. So my big coat was in my case, and I was swaddled in a kind of couple of sweatshirts I managed to borrow, but I was really, really cold. That's my first memory. But my second is Russia's 2 goals came in a 4-minute spell in the second half. That 4 minutes felt like about half an hour. There was so many chances in that 4 minutes, just wave after wave after wave of Russian attack, and you knew England couldn't withstand it. And when the second goal went in, I remember sort of looking at the stadium clock and thinking, "Oh, stadium clock stopped. That can't only have been 4 minutes since the last goal." Because I'd written down about, I had sort of 8 chances listed in my notebook. So I'd seen Russia then, so I knew that they were capable of doing something very special. I've been very lucky that I'd seen Zenit in a quarterfinal, a semi-final, and then the final of the Europa League. So I knew how good Arshavin was. And so, that Zenit was the basis of this team. And then because Austria-Switzerland was sort of nice and compact as a tournament, I was able to go to a huge number of games. So I was based in Bern. I went to all 3 of the Dutch group games, and I managed to get to Innsbruck for the Russian defeat to Spain, their first group game, which was they lost 4-1. But actually, that wasn't representative. I think Russia were a bit unlucky to lose that 4-1. But even better than that, and this is the dream as a journalist, the Spain second group game, they beat Sweden in Innsbruck. And in Innsbruck, for reasons that I've never been able to fathom, they had the press centre at the stadium, but they had another press centre in the centre of town, which was incredibly luxurious. And in this secondary press centre, you had local farms, local producers giving away free cheese, free sausage, free ham, free just meals, incredible wine, an enormous screen so you could watch anything else that was going on. So I remember watching Russia beat Greece, drinking this amazing wine, eating this free cheese. And then I think it was that day, I could have slightly mixed up which day is which, but I think it was that day, the famous incident when Hadaway turned up, the great Dutch pop star,
Yeah.
What Is Love? He turns up to play a concert in the press centre. So we're sort of, do you mind just going in the back room where there's some sort of desks?
Mm-hmm.
So can we take the booze with us? Yes, just get out the way. So basically everybody in the British press was there. Ken Early was there. Bonnie Ronnie was there. Bonnie Ronnie wrote a hilarious piece about this.
British and Irish press, Jonathan.
British and Irish press, sorry. Ken will literally kill me for that. And we go into this back room, drinking this great wine. It's like 11 p.m. by this point, midnight. Mm-hmm. And Hadaway is just with us. He's refusing to play his set. He's just talking to us. And it was just one of those great bizarre nights when Hadaway is I think he's a qualified doctor.
Okay.
And he'd done a partnership with Dr. Alban, who I think is a qualified dentist.
Don't worry, Michael. We will get back to Russia at some point, okay?
And the Dutchman.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was complaining about people who use the doctor handle, who aren't real doctors.
Right.
When he and Dr. Alban both are real doctors.
Mm-hmm.
He was complaining because he'd been coming through Dusseldorf. I think he'd been on a tour of Russia. This is why it's relevant. He's a Dutchman who'd done a tour of Russia. And he's immensely popular still by 2008, still popular in Russia. And he had a series of sort of the stubs of boarding passes with really random Russian towns like Perm, Murmansk, Smolensk. And he's been playing to packed houses there, and he's been paid in cash. So he comes back to Dusseldorf with the cash in his pocket. And because obviously you got the metal strip through the notes, it sets off a metal detector. And so he gets stung for a huge amount of tax in Dusseldorf. So he's waving about the tax receipt, complaining that the German tax authorities had taken 10,000 euros off him or whatever. He was going on about how much he liked Sean Wright-Phillips. I remember that quite clearly. Excellent. He was insisting Lampard and Gerrard could play together.
Love
under
that.
Very stern questioning from Bonnie Ronnet. And he just ended up getting drunk with us rather than playing a set.
And presumably, Jonathan, you talked him into being a Sunderland fan, and it was a case of Hadaway the lads.
A little forced.
Yeah.
You ruined that. Nice story. You spoiled it.
Yeah, I think he's German, not Dutch, but there we are.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, but either way, his nationality is quite intriguing. But yeah, so you thought you expected Russia to do well at this tournament.
I expected them to do well. I was disappointed by them against Spain, and then the Greece game, but the Sweden game they won 2-0. I thought they were exceptional in that game. Pavlyuchenko scored midway through the first half. Arshavin got one 5 minutes after half time, but they could have won that game 3-4, 5-0.
Yeah.
I thought they were brilliant.
That was the first Arshavin game. of
Yeah,
the
Sharpen
tournament.
had missed the first. He'd been suspended, hadn't he, the first 2 games because he'd been sent off against
Andorra.
Yeah.
Yes, he was sent off against Andorra, and there was it was a debate in Russia whether he should be taken to the tournament or not, because Russia always went out in the group stage. They have never progressed before beyond the group stage since the breakup of the Soviet Union. So you are going for 3 games. He is suspended for 2 games. Why should you take him? But Hiddink obviously never had any doubt about that.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about the Dutch, because I'd seen the 3-0 win against Italy, the 4-1 win against France, and I saw that I saw everybody else writing these pieces. Not everybody else, but I saw a lot of people writing these. Oh, the Dutch are back. This Van Basten's rediscovered the total footballing heart of the Netherlands, and I'd sort of been saying they're being distinctly underwhelmed by them. And I remember I was because I think I was still working for the FT at the time, so I was sitting next to Simon Cooper, who obviously is Anglo-Dutch, and was working for the FT, and his sort of discomfort with what he was watching, and trying to convince himself he was watching the rebirth of total football, but knowing that it wasn't, and accepting, he knew that this was it was a great sort of facade, and it wasn't somehow wasn't real.
Yeah, those were great players, obviously Sneijder and Van Nistelrooy and Robben, but they took their chances. They had their chances and took them perfectly. They scored brilliant goals, but other than that, they played very, very defensive game, both against Italy and against France. And actually, that was they continued that from the World Cup 2 years earlier with Van Basten, which was a very dire affair as far as the Dutchmen were concerned, and they went down in the battle against Portugal in the last 16 rounds, and they had 16 yellow cards and 4 red cards, and Khalid Boularus went out to hunt Cristiano Ronaldo. It was quite amazing how Marco van Basten, who is obviously a huge superstar as a player, as an attacker, he was so cautious, so negative as a coach. And I know I spoke to a lot of Dutch journalists at the time, and fans also. They were very relieved when in February, 4 months before the tournament, Van Basten agreed to join Ajax and to leave the national team. Ajax fans were not very excited about that, but all the other Dutch fans were just very, very, very excited, and they knew that the national team would be better without him.
Michael, talk to us a bit about Guus Hiddink. He was brought in to manage Russia in 2006. What were the expectations of him? Because I mean, obviously he's had a great reputation in the game for many, many years. Were people hopeful that he could do something with this exciting, sort of fairly reasonably young crop of Russian players?
Yeah, the problem with Russia, basically, since the break up of the Soviet Union, was the mentality. The desperately negative mentality. They were the ultimate losers. They lost when they had good teams, and they lost when they had bad teams, and they lost when they had excellent teams, and there were always some kind of bust up in the dressing room. And in '94, they tried to throw out their coach, and 14 players refused to go to the World Cup initially. And in '96, they had a magnificent team at the Euros, but only got 1 point, and the internal squabbles was absolutely dreadful. At a certain point, fans expected them to lose no matter what, and they suffered from poor luck, from poor refereeing decisions, from poor management, from injuries, and everybody expected them to lose. Absolutely, everywhere, every time, everywhere, they were expected to lose. They didn't qualify for a lot of tournaments, and when they did qualify, they just never got through the group stage. Guus Hiddink was brought to change the mentality. He was the first foreign coach in Russian history. He was a magician who produced magic with South Korea. in 2002. Then magic with Australia, which was even more important in 2006, because as the Australians, they haven't qualified for the World Cup for ages and ages, and he took them there while coaching PSV Eindhoven at the same time, and then took them to the last 16, and they have almost beaten Italy there in the last 16.
Right.
There was a last-minute penalty, which was quite unlucky. So Guus Hiddink was like some kind of magic to take someone who could actually have that golden touch, so change Russian mentality from one side to another. 190 just to make the complete switch, to make cut from all those failing Russian coaches, even though some of them were very good. Romantsev was brilliant, Semin was brilliant, but they never managed to change that mentality, and fans never expected anything from them until Hiddink came. When Hiddink came, they started to expect something. They started playing with self-confidence. Guus Hiddink told them to relax. The players usually came to the national team knowing that they will be slaughtered in the press and by the fans. Hiddink told them to forget about it, not care about that, just enjoy. And they did. But changing mentality is not an easy task, even for Guus Hiddink. And after that brilliant game against England that Jonathan spoke about, they were in the driving seat, and they needed just to beat Israel and Andorra to go to the Euros ahead of England. And after beating England, Konstantin Ziranov, he immediately after the final whistle, he was interviewed. And Ziranov was a very, very nice and very underrated midfielder of the team. He said, "We just need, we have to avoid shitting our pants in Israel." Literally, we shouldn't shit our pants in Israel. And what happened? They lost.
Yeah, they
lost in Israel in the last minute,
and they were unlucky, weren't they? Because didn't they? Wasn't it a breakaway after they hit the post? Have I remembered that correctly?
Yes, but they had a very poor game there. They had a dreadfully poor game in Israel, and they lost it deservedly. And they did. It was like, all the headlines in the Russian press were like, "Well, even Hiddink couldn't prevent that. We are not. He is a magician. They played brilliantly against England, but look, they couldn't do anything in Tel Aviv. What's going on?" Yeah. Then, obviously, Steve McLaren put on Steve Carson in that game against Croatia, and thanks to them, Russia went to the Euros in the first place.
You're welcome. Even that Andorra game, it's 1-0. Yes. And Shah been sent off. They made it hard.
Yes.
But I mean, this point you make about mentalities, it's absolutely. I mean, I remember speaking this years and years ago. I remember speaking to Yegor Titov, and Yegor Titov, who was the captain of Russia for a while in the late 90s, and he said that every time he felt the wheels leave the runway at from Moscow airport, he said he felt slightly sick. He hated that feeling of leaving Russia. And I remember talking to Akinfeev and him. So because Akinfeev was being linked to, he was constantly being linked to Manchester United. He was linked to Aston Villa for a while, and him sort of saying, "Well, I just don't like leaving Russia. I want to be in Russia." And I think with Akinfeev, it might have been partly to do with his religious faith. That he talked a lot about feeling that he needed to be around Orthodox churches, but that sort of sense of homesickness, that uneasiness when you leave Russia. Mm-hmm. And Zurianov I spoke to, and I remember him saying, shortly after Hiddink had taken over, he suddenly realised he was looking forward to joining up with the national team, which had never been the case before.
Yeah, even though they didn't have a lot of success on home soil as well. But and you mentioned that Zenit team, Jonathan, and it was very important because Zenit were coached by Dick Advocaat. It was all part of the Dutch Revolution that took place in 2007, 2008. Guus Hiddink in the national team, Dick Advocaat at Zenit, who were already sponsored by Gazprom, and it was after that incredible luck of Croatia beating England and Wembley and letting Russia to qualify for the Euros. Then came Zenit and thrashed Bayern Munich 4-0 in the UEFA Cup semi-finals with an incredible performance, but not only by Arshavin, but also by Pavel Pogrebnyak, who was supposed to be the starting striker at the Euros, but he was injured just ahead of, and that's why Pavlyuchenko came in. And you can look at it whatever way you want, because Pogrebnyak could probably have performed even better. We would never know. But Pavlyuchenko became a major star and then went to Tottenham, while Pogrebnyak only played for Reading. And so it was when Zenit won that UEFA Cup, there was a feeling that actually the Dutch Revolution could be working, and there was a sense of optimism ahead of the tournament, like never before.
Interesting. All right, chaps. So let's have a quick break, and then we'll talk about Russia at Euro 2008. We'll see you in a moment, everybody. Welcome back to the greatest games on the Blizzard. Yeah, interesting you saying that there was a bit of expectation, because normally expectation, certainly in England, we don't like expectation. We don't want that. Whereas in Russia, there was a little bit of expectation. But as you mentioned earlier, they lost their first game 4-1. And we talked about the Dutch winning their 3 games. I mean, Michael, you said just looking at those results, impressive results, 3-0 to Italy, 4-1 against France, and so on and so forth. So when they met in the quarterfinal, as you say, you have the 2 Dutch managers. Surely the expectation in Russia was low.
Not really, but the expectations in Holland were extremely high.
Yeah, okay.
Outrageously high. There was euphoria, and that's part of the thing. It was like Van Basten was asked by all the journalists in Switzerland, why do players love you so much? Even though most of the players didn't like him at all. And Clarence Seedorf and Mark van Bommel refused to go to the tournament because of him. And Ruud van Nistelrooy also refused to go to the tournament, but was later persuaded to join nevertheless. They all fell out with him during the World Cup 2 years previously. So and Van Basten was very, very worried about that optimism ahead of that game. There was supposed to be open training sessions with the fans, and he threw the fans away. He didn't want fans anywhere near the team. There were more than 100,000 Dutch fans in Basel that evening, and most of them didn't have tickets, but they were prepared to celebrate in the streets. And we've beaten France, we've beaten Italy. Who are those Russians with Guus Hiddink? Who's is going home? And that was the atmosphere in the Dutch camp. And we should also, do we have time to talk about Khalid Belarus and his tragedy?
Yeah, absolutely, because I think that's an important part of it.
So those preparations and that euphoria in the Dutch camp, well, fans were never affected by it, but obviously, and journalists neither. But the team was very much affected by the fact that a few days before the game, Khalid Belarus' wife had a miscarriage, and his newborn daughter died immediately, and it was a huge tragedy for him personally, obviously. And Van Basten didn't want to, he just wanted to send him home and to grieve with his family. But Belarus said, no, I want to stay and I want to play. If you pick me, I will play. And well, tragedy aside, Khalid Belarus was he was the very symbol of the negative attitude of Marco van Basten, because such a player would come nowhere near a side coached by Guus Hiddink, for example. He is just a very, very, very rough defender, like, an English defender from the 60s. He could easily play for Leeds United and all that. But how he got number 9 shot at Chelsea, we would never know. But his technical skills were close to zero, and he just went out to kick people, to kick people, and that's okay. But when you are Leeds United of the 70s, it's not okay. When you are the Netherlands national team, and well, obviously after his tragedy, nobody could have criticized him anymore. But his very presence in the squad, Ryan Babel, he shouldn't have been there. Ryan Babel was injured right before the tournament, and Marco van Basten called up Khalid Boularus to replace Ryan Babel, who was a winger. He replaced him with a defender, who then went on to play in all the games. And he played defensively. He played very well. So he was in the starting lineup, and the Dutchman also chose to play that game with black armbands to honor. In memory of the deceased daughter of Khalid Boularus. And after the game, a lot of players said that, didn't say that, but the journalists, that journalist talked a lot about it. It was a mistake because it was it sent a wrong message to the players. They didn't have the right energy and the right state of mind. It affected them very, very much. Whereas the Russians actually went out to kill them. And for most of the game, the Russians were much, much better. They were playing offensive football, brilliant offensive football, and they have just slaughtered them. It should have been decided in 90 minutes. And it was an incredible extra time when the Dutch just disappeared, and Khalid Boularus had been substituted, but that didn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite remarkable watching this game back, Jonathan, just seeing how one-sided it was for periods of the game, and it shouldn't have all really gone to extra time. But what were your thoughts of the match? And what
well, I mean, I went into it really, really looking forward to it because I was convinced Russia were really good, and I wasn't convinced by the Dutch, and that wasn't quite the narrative that had been presented. And it's one of those games you watch, or certainly I watched, and I probably didn't quite appreciate it in the right way at the time because although Russia were clearly on top, my expectation was still they're going to mess this up. But they'll
like
go
always.
out luckily, like always, exactly. That, and it nearly happens. In my head, what I was thinking was, it's going to be a tale of Russia dominating, and then Van Nistelrooy will stick one in with 10 minutes to go, and the Dutch will win 1-0, and everyone will forget how good this game has been. And I was also, when I don't want to say I've been advocating for. Sorry, the pun of Dick Advocate is obviously kind of lodged in my head. I didn't mean to make that. When you've been sort of suggesting that Russia are going to be really good, and they've shown little signs against Sweden, and the Dutch have gone there with a brilliant record in the groups, and you're sort of saying this could be an absolute classic. And so you really want the game to be a classic, because journalists like nothing more than being proved right. I like nothing more than being proved right. The only thing that matters in football is me being proved right. And thank goodness, this was a great game, and it really was a great game. And I so enjoyed watching it back because it's just relentless. Russia going at them and going at them and going at them, and it's 0-0 at half time, but Russia have had by far the better of that first half, and the only Dutch threat is set plays.
Yes,
absolutely. And actually, that had been the case. The counterattacks and the set pieces, though there are offensive threats on those games against Italy and France as well. And at the World Cup 2 years previously, the Russians were just. And look at Khalid Boularus as the right back for the Dutchman, and then Yuri Zhirkov, who's Hiddink. He took a winger, actually, attacking midfielder, and just before the tournament, he told Zhirkov that he is going to play left back. That was idea. It didn't happen in the qualifiers. It happened just before the tournament, and Zhirkov was Arshavin obviously was the best player in that game, especially in extra time. But Zhirkov was the second best player very, very, very close to Arshavin in that game.
Just to talk about Belarus, must have been, I don't know, let's say 2003, something like that. I found myself one Friday night, I found myself in Waalwijk and went to watch RKC Waalwijk against PSV.
And here he was.
And I saw this sort of stooped, balding winger absolutely devastate this lumbering buffoon of a fullback. And of course, they were Arjen Robben and Kali Belarus. And Arjen Robben, and the only thing I couldn't believe, I think he was 19 at the time. And he looked like he was like 35 at the time. So I couldn't believe he was as young as 19. And then when Belarus moved to Chelsea, I sort of, that can't be the same bloke I saw at Waalwijk. But it was.
Yeah. It's funny when you look back on things like that. As you said, Jonathan, it was 0-0 at half time, and it seemed surprising that it was, but we didn't have to wait too long for the game's first goal. It was around 55 minutes. Pavlyuchenko volleyed in from close range. A nice finish, and
it's a great cross from Semak as well. And Semak was such a good player. I love Semak as a player.
But you know when a team is superior to the other when the goal goes in, and it felt like, this has been coming. The way Russia celebrated it was sort of vindication, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. You saw the courage, the sort of cavalier spirit of that side. That Zhirkov hugely attacking from left back, and Yukov incredibly attacking from right back. And we'll get on to Yukov in about a quarter of an hour of game time, not the podcast. We're not going on that long, don't worry. But the thing that liberated them was Semak at the back of midfield, dropping in between Ignashevich and Kolodin, the two centre backs, and yet there he is bombing down the left to put the cross in, hitting the space where did Belarus go off just after this or just before? Because he goes off for Johnny
afterwards.
Just afterwards.
Just afterwards. But look, exactly talking about Semak, he was the holding midfielder whom Hiddink recalled just before the tournament and gave him the captain's armband, which is quite incredible. A newcomer, the returning player who is becoming the captain immediately, but he was the holding midfielder, and and he was playing, like you're saying, the total football. He is on one side of the pitch, and immediately in the same move, he is on the other side of the pitch. And for the Dutchmen, you had Nigel de Jong and Orlando Engelar, who were, they were brilliant destroyers, both of them, but creators they were not. And that was
that chance. I think it's from a free kick. It might be a corner in the first half. It's a Van der Vaart. I think it's a Van der Vaart free kick from the right. It's cleared, and it falls for Engelar on the edge of the box. He's got time, and a proper Dutch midfielder would at least have struck the ball cleanly. And it's this horrible drag, and he had so much time. You sort of think, that's not. That's not right.
He's a nice player for Leeds United in the 70s, but not for the Dutch team.
No.
So can I just distance myself from slagging off Leeds United in the 70s? I think they're a great team.
I think we understand the point Michael is making, though.
But then, so you talk about Anu.
Yeah.
So you think 1-0 up, going into the second half of the second half, and then that chance after 70 minutes.
Yeah.
And that would have been an unbelievable goal. That the Dutch lose possession just inside the Russian half. This amazing break of sort of 20, 30, 40-yard passes, which somehow ends up with Yukov running onto it. So the right back running into the box to a little sort of chip ball over the top. And he clips it on the half volley. And it's so casual. You almost think he must be offside, but he's not offside. And he's really unlucky because basically 2 feet in either direction and there's no way Van der Sar's saving it. But Van der Sar just sort of sticks out a hand and stops it. But if that had gone in, it would have been one of the most incredible goals. And for your right back, with 20 minutes to go, when you're 1-0 up in a game you're not really fancied to win, apart from by cognoscenti like Michael and me, it just it shows the philosophy and the spirit of that.
Well, it does, yeah. And I also forgot to mention in the first half about you talk about the philosophy and the spirit. I mean, after about half an hour, Denis Kolodin, the centre half, gets the ball. He's about 45 yards out or something like that. and he thinks, yeah, I can hit the top corner from here. And he smashes one just over.
Yeah.
And again, I appreciate, I don't want to sort of jump back to the first half, but it goes into the overall point that they seem to have goals, or at least goal threats, everywhere in this side.
Yeah, you should have known Kolodin. Kolodin thinks he thought he could score from any distance in any place, anywhere. He had an amazing shot, really.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that his career was later ruined by knee injuries, because his shots were just... Ari Hahn would have been proud of that.
Exactly. It's about 8 minutes from time, Jonathan. There's a nice move. I'm pretty sure it was Arshavin involved again. It's not capitalised upon. The ball is kind of squared, and the Netherlands managed to get it away. And really, it's, as I say, not capitalised on, and that should have probably maybe ended the game, but it just showed you how superior Russia were as they came forward in their droves, and the Netherlands were hanging on. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know what the shot count was, but it must have been 3-4 times as many for Russia as for the Netherlands. And then, you just when you think they've done it, they go back and they're the old Russia, and it's so soft. The goal, 86 minutes. Schneider free kick from the left.
Yeah.
And nobody picks up Van Nistelrooy.
Yeah, just leave Van Nistelrooy. He'll be okay.
Yeah, heads it in. 1-1. And, I mean, I don't know what Russians felt, but I mean, obviously I felt gutted because I had to rewrite my report. That's the main thing. But I also just felt, this is not fair. This is just not the way it's meant to be. Russia have been so good here to lose it on something like that. But my assumption was they won't win in extra time.
Was that your assumption too, Michael? I mean, because they'd been so much better, but as you say, due to the history and that negative feeling coming back in, you have the great player Van Nistelrooy scoring again in the tournament. And you think, this is the same old.
Yeah, it's just like after slaughtering England, you get last minute defeat in Israel. The very same thing, and obviously, I think. That Russian players thought at that very moment, that's it, that's over. We have been playing so well, and it's only 1-1. We have wasted so many chances, and now this soft goal. And the last few minutes of the normal time, you could sense that Russia felt doomed, and then Kolodin made an absolutely stupid foul in injury time. Absolutely useless foul to get a second yellow card and get sent off. And it was just like Russia getting sent to... Now they had to play extra time with 10 men without their very important defender. And it felt like that's it, they're finished. But then it turned out that the ball went out. The linesman called the referee, Luboš Michal, and his linesman told him that the ball went out of play before the foul, and then the yellow card and subsequently the red card were nullified, and Kolodin stayed on the pitch. And wow, at that very moment, you could see the Russians. Well, luck is with us after all. He is not sent off. He hasn't been sent off. Wow, we are going to win this. And well, the extra time after, I think that Kolodin red card that wasn't a red card, that was the turning point of the whole game. From the mentally, that was the trick. Somehow after that, I think also the final whistle and Guus Hiddink gets to talk to them, and I'm absolutely certain that Guus told them, well, look, luck is on your side. You have just committed an useless foul.
Yeah,
you have always lost this game. You are still in it. Go and play. They are tired. They are very, very tired. And you are fresh. Your mind is fresh, and the extra time from Russians was much, much better than the first 90 minutes. Because if in the first 90 minutes they were much better than the Dutch, in the extra time they were infinitely better. It was just like playing. It's like Brazil playing Luxembourg, really.
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, yeah, it seemed like it's funny because that goal goes in, and as Michael said, the negative feeling comes back in. But yet you watch extra time, and it's like Russia were pleased that they got another 30 minutes to play against them.
Yeah, but I think Michael's absolutely right. I mean, certainly my feeling, because when have you ever seen that? I mean, okay, in the VAR time,
sure,
it can happen. I'd never seen that before. A red card being retracted, and I remember it took a little while in the press box to work out what was going on. That I thought, did you see the red card? I saw the red card. Yeah, be still there. And then the linesman must have flagged. And so that just it changed immediately. Just changed the whole. It just the game was going down one way, and it's sort of wrenched back and shoved on a different course. And that last half hour, Russia absolutely sensational. I mean, Pavlyuchenko hits the bar.
Yeah.
And then even then you start to think, because it gets to half time, it gets to 5 minutes after half time and extra time, and you're thinking, like, when are they going to get this? When are they going to score this goal they so clearly deserve? And what was really striking for me was, obviously I was sitting with the British press, and most of them, I'm not saying they wanted the Dutch to win, but their assumption was the Dutch would win, and it made their lives easier if the Dutch won, because so many of the Dutch players speak English. And also, they're known to an English audience. So if you're writing for an English newspaper, it's easier if the people you're writing about are people your audience know about. And the mood changed in the press box, that they clearly wanted Russia to win by half time and extra time. That the way Russia were playing had seduced them, had won them over. And I would fully agree with Michael that the best player was Arshavin. I thought Zhirkov was brilliant. I thought Anyukov was brilliant. I thought Semek was brilliant. But the player that seemed to impress everybody else was Pavlyuchenko. And I think maybe I'd seen enough of Pavlyuchenko before to know that he's not actually all that. And I still sort of was sad that Pogrebnyak wasn't there. And actually, I remember in Manchester when Zenit won the UEFA Cup as was then. I remember Pogrebnyak sort of, because it was that day he got injured, wasn't it? It was the UEFA Cup final when he got the injury.
Yeah.
And he limps through, kind of cradling the trophy, limps through the mix zone. And sort of, I think he knew then he was out, that he wasn't going to play in the Euros. And sort of, so I sort of still felt this great sadness of Pogrebnyak. And I wasn't convinced at all by Pavlyuchenko, but he was excellent in this game. And then finally, 8 minutes to go, Arshavin, who's just... Arshavin, it's like Arshavin's on Duracell and everybody else is on whatever the batteries they're up against Duracell in the advert. Tears down the left, chips over Van der Sar, and just sort of from the angle of the press box, you think it's going in. As it turns out, it was actually going to just drift wide. And Torbinski runs in a substitute and bundles it over the line from a couple of feet. Yeah. And as soon as that goes in, there's no way the Dutch are coming back from this. They're dead on their feet.
And finally, Arshavin, someone is there to put away one of the chances he's created. Yeah. Because he'd created quite a few, and very fittingly. And again, the celebrations are wild. They think, right, that's surely it now. Surely, we'll win it. But of course, you want that 2-goal cushion. 5 minutes later, Arshavin gets his goal. And I'm guessing, Michael, that was one of the most satisfying moments in recent years of being a Russia fan, when he scored that goal, because that put everything there was no doubt left. Russia had won the game, and their best player on the day, Arshavin, had got the goal.
Yes, of course. I'm not a Russia fan, but actually, but
sorry.
I know the feeling of Russian fans was absolutely.
Yeah.
It was the greatest night of Arshavin of his career by far, and the extra time was was the best 30 minutes of his career, and that was the best night for Russian fans. Since the 80s, and it was just incredible. It was such a rewarding that the Russian fans really understood that night that they can't just be afraid of everything, and they can be positive. They can play brilliant football against the top side, the very top sides in the world. They can beat anyone. They they should play offensively. They have the talent. They have the mentality. Well, that was only for one night. They are still. It's been 13 years since that evening in Basel, and they are still looking for that feeling. They have never found it again.
Yeah, I mean, what a feeling it was, though, Jonathan. But I think,
I think they're a little bit unlucky that they run into Spain again in the semi-final.
Yeah,
I mean, it's Spain were clearly I mean, maybe we didn't quite appreciate it then, but certainly by 2010, it was obvious Spain were the best side in the world. And not every tournament has a great side. And I think in 2004, this Russia side could easily have won it, but Spain were just that level above. But that third goal as well, there was the fact that Sharvan just sticks it through Van der Sar's legs.
Yeah,
The sort of the cheek of it, the impishness of it. It sort of encapsulated everything he'd been about that night. The joy, the mischief, and it was just the. I mean, I'd say this is one of my most enjoyable days in journalism covering this game.
Yeah, and for that alone, Jonathan, we thank Russia.
Well, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, it's been a pleasure talking to you about this game, and I think, I mean, I think you summed it up early, didn't you? That when you said it was perhaps the end of the good times, well, for Russia, and not maybe until the 2018.
It was the beginning and the end at the very same evening.
Exactly. The Netherlands would go to the World Cup final 2 years later, and it would take Russia hosting the World Cup to kind of give them a bit more cheer again. But still, what a moment in time it was. So thank you. And for more stories like that, do check out theblizzard.co.uk. But thank you for coming on the pod, Michael. Pleasure.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Jonathan and I will be back next week with another great game from the history of football. We'll see you then.